We are going to call the special meeting on Tuesday, April 17th to order. The time is 12:01. And the special meeting is in reference to the City Council Harbor District Liaison Standing Committee. And may I have a roll call, please?
Mayor Normandy.
Present.
Commissioner Matoush.
Here.
Commissioner Bernardo.
Here.
Councilmember Diego.
Is here.
Okay.
Great. And is there any public comment cards?
No.
Thank you. And if you can go on to matters of consideration number 1, please.
Item 1, study session on possible new agreement between Harbor District and City of South San Francisco. Mike Patrell, City Manager, and Steve McGraw, District General Manager.
You want to take it away, Mike?
Happy to do so. So, staff have been meeting, both Harbor District staff and city staff, relative to the current JPA and the future. I think you all know we have approximately 8 years left on the current JPA. And so I think it would be appropriate to have a conversation on whether we are going to change, let it expire, a new JPA. So in our conversations with staff to staff, we have a recommendation of rewriting the JPA and extending it, and basically renewing the marriage vows, as I've been saying, between the Harbor District and the city. The purpose of this meeting is to review that basic idea of, is that something you agree with that we should entertain? And secondly, we do have an outline of the business terms of what a new JPA may look like, and the length and that sort of thing. So we're hoping to get feedback from this committee on both the basic question of, do we continue the relationship into the future? And if so, what do you think of these business terms? With that feedback, assuming you would like us to explore it further, then staff will get busy meeting again and to take those business terms and start turning it into a more formal draft JPA, which then we could have the lawyers look at, and then have another meeting with this body to look at that first draft, again, to get feedback. And then conceptually in the future, when there's a point when that new JPA is in a state that this committee is satisfied with it and likes it and can recommend it to your respective boards, then we can move it to that meeting. I don't know how long that process would take. I guess it just depends on our discussions. But that's why we're here today. I don't know, Steve, anything you'd like to add?
It's coincidental that it was exactly a year ago today that we last met on this particular topic. We then moved on to a discussion of the implementation agreement. The discussion successfully concluded last September. And so now we're on to this part that will guide us forward over the next 8 years and beyond. At the last meeting of a year ago, I think that the issue that left out of the city manager and myself after the meeting was that we had proposed a similar sort of term sheet with a long additional term. And to address that in particular on this occasion, what we've done is we're suggesting an initial 15-year term with a couple of what we call double green light options to renew, so that it would take the assent of both parties to renew those for additional terms beyond the initial 15 years. I'm not going too much shorter than 15 years in that initial term, because the district is currently looking at some significant capital investments, and that would be, the resolution of that part of it would be a key component of any new agreement that we do enter into.
Thank you. Councilman Diego.
So what was driving the initial ask of, I don't know if it was 40 or 30 years, was the investment. That, in other words, to make that work, you need that bit of time. Does 15 work on some level, justify an investment of multiple millions of dollars?
The key would be, the two parts that I would consider key to that would be the terms and conditions under which the agreement would be extended or renewed beyond that initial 15 years, and then the terms and conditions that will guide what would happen if it were not.
Okay.
Right? And I think that the staff have talked about that and things like depreciation schedules and ownership of assets. And
So it sounds like if there was not a double green light to go into the next 15 years, there could still be some language or arrangements that allows the entity to be satisfied as far as their long-term investment.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilman Adiego, anything from our commissioners?
At this moment.
Okay.
Well, if we look at the specific terms, then perhaps the best place to start is one of the exhibits, Exhibit C, which is labeled as the responsibility map. And we talk you through first the basic geography of, under a new JPA, who would have what. Do you have that?
No, we don't, Robert and I don't have a copy right now.
Oh, there we go.
You just share.
Thank you.
So,
I apologize, Commissioner, I didn't bring hard copies for you.
So is C the last exhibit?
Uh-huh.
it is, the very last page. in the-
That's a good place to start.
Yeah. Start at the back.
Well, here.
So looking at the map and the legend, you can see the things that are black striped would be the responsibility of the Harbor District. The things polka dot are assigned to WIDA, that's the ferry terminal. And then the red striped would be the city. So right now, the areas on the bottom for this city that say Office R&D Campus, the big green space that says boundary of precise plan, that has already been pulled out of the JPA through the implementation agreement that was done last summer. And that is part of the new Oyster Point development and then the city's hotel site. So that's already moving forward. What this would, from the city side, add to that is significantly the area kind of in the red checkered, which is the peninsula. And I think that's probably been the area of the most discussion between staff of who's responsible for that. And probably, well, because that area has some significant challenges. That is part of the landfill, that little peninsula that sticks out. And therefore, it's unique and difficult to deal with. We are proposing that the city would take that and the city would be responsible for maintenance of that area. But a lot of discussions about, well, what does that mean? Do you move the Harbor District office? Do you, what do we do? But the basics are, the Harbor District would maintain and operate everything in the black. We have everything else, and the exception being the WIDA property. Now, there's a lot of detail behind this, ideas on joint maintenance. It doesn't make sense that the city would hire someone to clean its bathrooms and the Harbor District would hire someone to clean their bathroom. We should have a joint operating agreement that would have a shorter term for efficiencies and cost savings for both bodies. But I'd like to pause and see if there's any comment on the geography, or Steve, do you want to add anything before we ask for comments?
It's important to recognize this is a broad brushstroke
Yes.
map, obviously, and the devil will be in the details, especially if you look along the, sort of, for example, the west side of the marina, the interface between the district's responsibilities and the land side city responsibilities, and exactly where that line is, how much of the dock landing is in that city jurisdiction. So those are details we recognize will need to be fleshed out. I think it's important to recognize again that this is broad brush. This fit with the Harbor Master's office clearly is another issue. Location of the Harbor Master's office, it could theoretically be moved. That building, in fact, could be moved comparatively easily. The marina is not a large area, but from a Harbor Master's perspective, that location is the perfect location. Eyes on both sides of the east basin and the west basin. These are issues that I think need to be addressed and fleshed out as we move forward.
So the maintenance of the peninsula with the harbor flues, however that's shared, if it's purely the cities, is a forever proposition.
Correct.
And having heard some of the challenges, I think it was your harbor master on a tour indicated that the normal dredging that has to occur adjacent to, yeah, we were together, right? Creates in some movement of the peninsula itself. So in an ideal world where dollars didn't count, you might look at that peninsula and decide to remove it. All the fill and just draw it back so it's in line with the other basins. Can we at least, to partially explore that, have that number in the discussion?
We can. Marion, I know you've had some discussions about we need to engage someone to actually help us understand the problems and then potential fixes. One of those fixes may be just get rid of it.
Okay.
Anything to add?
Yeah, so, what we do know is it can't disappear because it's a landfill. So we do have to make sure that we deal with the water inundation. We do have to fix it. What's been done thus far is the consultants that were out there doing the Oyster Point work, since they were already out there, they did scope out that area. I have not yet received the report, but it's assessed the situation and kind of laid out what could deal with sea level rise. And so it's probably a matter of a few weeks before we get that and understand the cost benefit.
So Ms. Lee, what I'm actually proposing is just to look at the option of removing the landfill.
Scoop all the garbage
Oh.
out, haul it away.
So that would allow you to draw it back and let the.
Let the bay take it again.
Yeah.
Well, we'd have to look at that.
Well, no,
Yeah.
I would like to know.
Yeah.
That idea.
Talking about the spit.
Anything from the commissioners?
If we did remove that, I guess we'd have to explore more dockage. No reason to just leave a big old vacant space there. The other thing I was kind of curious about is a large area here about WIDA. What is WIDA's financial contribution, and what do we have exactly for that amount of land? Just so that South San Francisco doesn't find itself burdened and the Harbor District doesn't find itself burdened at some point in time. How do we make sure that we've got proper maintenance from the city's point of view and the Harbor District's point of view?
We have a lease with WIDA. It was a 55-year lease, I believe. And the rent was prepaid in one lump sum at the commencement of that lease and paid directly to the Division of Boating and Waterways to reduce our debt that we incurred when we developed and improved the marina. The lease does have maintenance obligations associated with it. I don't have that lease with me. Going back to the spit itself, Councilman Diego, it's always the run-on effects of something like that. And the thing that leaps to my mind is the fuel dock and the fuel lines that are running down, and the fuel dock being attached to the end of the spit,
Sure.
and then also the guest dock, which is attached to the spit. Neither of those, in that ideal world that you posited, where money was no object, neither of those are deal breakers, but just something to be considered.
Yeah, part of the discussion, but I appreciate that Tom immediately went to the fact that without that, there would be opportunity for, not sure we need a larger marina yet, but there would be opportunity to add, and so maybe the Harbor District would like to, join us in the financial proposition of removing that, because it would give you more opportunity in the water.
Oh, we thought you were gonna remove it, and we were just gonna
just-
rent it for slips.
Okay.
When you removed it, we saw the pilings going in.
I think we're just
We knew
jousting with each other.
We
It's
knew
fine.
you were generous.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, if you take that map in this conversation and then we'll move to attachment B, which we have some hard copies. These are the specific terms. And under term 2, operation and maintenance at the bottom of page 1, it talks about the spit of land, which we do call a landside spit. The proposal is that temporarily operation and maintenance of that area would remain with the Harbor District as it currently is, no change, until the city will take it over and improve it and relocate the district office. So that is, both of those are a real sticking point, partially because we don't know what it will take to fix the spit. When you look at sea level rise, I mean, whether that's just piling more dirt on top, which we don't think will work, or does it mean building walls, and how much will that cost? We're not sure. And then the issue of if the city were to hypothetically invest millions of dollars to improving the area and taking care of sea level rise, then the city would probably want to do something with it, like a public park or some payoff for its residents, us having spent the money to save the parcel, and that maybe having a parking lot with a district, harbor master's office is not the highest and best use. We just don't know. And we look to policymakers to decide for us, what do you want to do with that spit of land? It is, as pointed out, the ideal location for a harbor master's office. But again, if we're going to be, as a city, faced with putting millions of dollars of our people's residents' money into it, perhaps we want to do something better. So, of all the terms, I think this is the one we've had a lot of discussion on and haven't really reached any decision other than we need to work on this more. So any feedback on that would be welcome. Steve, something to add?
Yeah, again, I would just go back to that ideal location, and perhaps that is the highest and best use for the end of that spit.
I was under the impression that the land level was going to be adjusted by the development in general. Now, did they somehow say that they're not gonna work on the land side part? Just, they're gonna exclude the spit and just pretend it didn't exist?
The spit has never been included in the Oyster Point development plans.
Interesting.
Yeah, the boundary never extended that far.
Ah,
So it's left to us to find a way forward.
Through the chair, thank you. I understand that might be an ideal location for harbor master's office or a district office. I myself, if the office were placed somewhere else, I'd be totally fine with that, because similar to the idea that Councilmember Adiego had with regards to the peninsula, possibly, just imagining hypothetically that it goes away, could that spit be used for something else? And it was very interesting, I thought, idea to use it for some sort of public use. I thought that was a very interesting idea. So I myself, I'm not necessarily wedded to having the district office on that spit. I would like to get more information. I'm new to this committee, so I have quite a learning curve, but I'd really like to know more about possible alternatives where a district office could be relocated, for example. So for me, I'm flexible on that personally. So I just need to get more information and gather more data. Thank
Commissioner
you.
Bernard, may I ask, have you been to the harbor master office? And I only ask because the location is important, because they're able to see outside
Yes.
the walls, and the dolphins, that they're able to, for public safety, see who's coming and going.
Yes.
If you move it any further out somewhere, unless it's a tower, they're not gonna have visual access of
Right.
who's coming and going from the dolphins.
Yes, I think that, and I'm not an engineer or anything like that, but I think that with regards to whomever designs the next district office, there could be some sort of height advantage. There could be all sorts of other, I think, alternatives. And like I said, I'm open to moving the office, elsewhere. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, we'll certainly know more once we get some of the engineering results, and I
Okay.
do think the cost of saving the spit and improving it may play into the conversation.
Good point, thank you. That's also a good point.
But what I'm hearing is something we've already started to look at and asked is, you know, if not there, where else could it go?
What
And
about the
would
old
it work?
bait tackle?
That would be at the top of the list of possible locations for either relocated or new building.
By the launch ramp?
Yeah. Yeah, that, exactly right. Exactly right. As you say though, Mayor Normandy, the current location, it's looking
Right
east,
on.
looking west, you're right in the middle of things there, but the bait shop location would be a
Santa
runaround.
Cruz is like that. They're able to oversee the launch ramp.
Yeah.
Great conversation. Any other comments for your general manager and our city manager?
Well, if not on that, maybe we could walk through attachment B, which are the basic terms. Term 1 basically reflects what you see on the map, who has what. Term 2, the district to own in the waterside marina, and fuel docks, dock landings, city to maintain everything else. It lists that. District to O&M land side of the ferry terminal. So that's that part. The next, district to temporarily O&M the spit until we figure this out. That is something to do. Next page, shared maintenance agreements. I mentioned earlier, we do think that would be a benefit. And on those shared maintenance agreements, did we put the term in here? That those would be a shorter term than 15
Shorter
years.
term, more frequent, I mean, possibly informal review to where we
Right.
could look at, how is this working out? How's this worked out the last quarter, the last 6 months, the last year?
So what are we thinking generally, 3, 5 years? What is in your mind?
3 to 5 and possibly annual, but annual reviews, I think, is a key component of
Agreed.
this. And it might be just a simple check-in, you know, all good, yeah, all good.
So
It
for-
might be that over the course of the year, we have uncovered an unintended consequence or an unforeseen circumstance that would allow.
Yeah.
So
Modify.
an example of some things we've talked about is maintenance of the parking lots. Both entities under this scenario have parking lots. Doesn't make sense to have 2 parking lot crews. So let's say, for example, the city took that on and said, okay, we will maintain the Harbor District's parking lots in exchange for which you will pay us a certain amount of money. And at the time we perfect that deal, it's probably a win-win for both parties. But as the year goes on, maybe labor costs have gone up, something has changed in the environment, well, that's no longer a win-win. We just want that flexibility to come back together and say, okay, well, we need to adjust. And that would work for things like landscape maintenance, the electrical maintenance, and the street lighting out there, all the common entities. But put that in a separate agreement, not in the JPA, where staff can regularly balance it, just to make sure that it works well for both entities. Capital improvements, there is a desire by the city to put into a new JPA as specific as reasonably possible the plan for capital improvements out of the Harbor District. I think we as staff have expressed certainly a desire that the renovations that we've seen take place continue until the entire marina has been refurbished and maintained. So work on specifics here is listed as a 5-year plan, which I think, Steve, you already have
Yes.
a notion of what that would be.
That's right.
But capture that in the JPA to give the city some forecasting of what's to happen and that it will actually happen. So,
Just on a side, related side note, the district did approve the goals for the 2018. That includes the replacement of Dock 12. And John has got an RFP ready to go, pretty much, on that for design and engineering for Dock 12.
With an option for 13 and 14 as well.
Oftentimes in a marina where there is some capacity, rather than sequentially 12, 13, 14, and then 3 successive mobilizations, 3 successive series of disruption, the marina might do all three at the same time. We're going to issue an RFP for Dock 12. We want to maintain the flexibility of coming back to the board though, and looking at something larger, dependent upon these negotiations, of course, this new agreement.
So I think term 3, the capital improvements, will be a mixture of art and science. As I think from the city side, I can confidently say we want to lock the Harbor District in as tight as possible, that yes, these will take place and this is the timeline, and we can be assured that the investment will be made in the marina. And I, just based on our conversation, can understand that perhaps on the Harbor District side, they would like more flexibility because things change and the economy may change. But where to draw that line between, from the city side, our desire to have some written confirmation, and from the Harbor District side to have that flexibility to react to whatever's happening in the real world, that will be another term that will have to be debated and probably rely on you and your respective bodies to tell us where to draw that line.
So, Steve, or the board, is the Oyster Point Marina, is that debt-free now?
Yes.
Debt-free? And so you most likely would go back to the Department of Boating and Waterways for,
If we needed
lending?
to, if, for example, we were doing a bigger than just Dock 12, we would look at possibly some debt financing, whether that was DBW or the CSDA Finance Corporation or some other.
CSDA again?
Sorry, the California Special Districts Association,
Okay.
our version of League of California Cities.
Okay.
They have an arm that is a finance corp.
And then do any of those entities, I mean, you know what the market is, and the market has changed, you know, since this was created. So looking forward, if you were to, you know, look at possibly doing 12 or more, not 12 or others, are there any limitations that prevent you from creating a marina that will serve the type of craft that are most financially viable?
Well, that's key to the design and engineering would be an analysis
Okay.
of where is the demand. We have a fairly good analysis already around the bay, and particularly in our marina, where the vacancies are, where there's a waiting list.
Okay.
And I think John could probably speak in more detail to that if we want to get into that detail. But our, for example, our 30s and under, we've got vacancies, and our 45s and overs, we've got a waiting list. So any reconfiguration or rebuilding of the docks would take that into account so that we can serve where the need is.
But there's no government entity out there that's gonna pass on this, and tell you that you have to keep so many 30 and unders, or?
Not in the bay. I don't know if BCDC weighs in on that. I know
You know,
that in
it's something,
recreational.
yeah, I've got
in
something in my head
recreational-
with the Treasure Island situation.
In recreational marinas on the coast, the Coastal Commission will weigh in
Okay.
and try to dictate the
Okay.
slit mix ratio.
All right.
One thing I'd just like to keep us all on the same page with, right now, the Harbor District is on one of these, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, in that we have many projects and we're being strangled in regulation. So we can all agree here, you know, we're gonna do this now, and it's, get anything done in California is a bit of a regulation log jam. So I think that somehow we should address that language, you know, each work to the best of our abilities.
Yeah.
Because I'm sensing that we both want to move through, but there's no use saying, well, it's going to be done by June, and it turns out some agency says, June of which century?
Yeah.
True. So, you know, if there's a basic agreement that we should explore this, I think then it comes to staff to come up with the language to present to you that would, at the one hand, lock in our vision and the shared agreement on where to go, yet with language that allows the flexibility for things like changing of regulations or the economy or other things that may delay or create a change. And then a mechanism for how do we make that change? Do we come back to this body to say that these external forces have changed what's in the JPA, but there's a mechanism for us to react to that and not just wonder what to do.
And additionally, how to fund it. Because the next regulation change will cost us money no matter what,
Sure.
that we didn't anticipate.
Okay. Term 4, sea level rise and landfill subsidence. The staff recommendation, as much as I would have liked to argue otherwise, is that the city is responsible for all sea level rise and landfill subsidence. The Harbor District is responsible for operation and maintenance, and the question we debated was, does maintenance include sea level rise? And I couldn't find a way to bootstrap that in there. But likewise, landfill subsidence. I still think we will have issues if a parking lot has some issue, whether that's basic maintenance or is that landfill subsidence. But as a general concept, present that really to city council to say that that is on us to work through. I don't think there'd be any disagreement from the
No, I'm
Harbor
good- I'm
District
good with
side.
that.
You're good with that?
You are.
Yes, okay. But I think both of these have been unanswered questions under the current JPA, and it caused quite a bit of debate on various repairs. And felt the need that we need to make that clear, particularly on sea level rise. We as a city are moving forward with planning and need to understand the boundaries of our responsibility so we can go get that done. New operating agreement, that's just some general terms. Again, the 15-year terms and the options, and in terms of termination. Steve, anything you want to add on?
No, I think that if the exercise of those options is the double green light, then for either party to not renew that requires plenty of notice to the other party. If it's because of any default or failing, that there'd be an opportunity to cure that default or failing, and that we try to define those terms as closely as we can going in, because, and even with that best effort, we're gonna miss something. But I think that this would take us out 45 years, and I think, I gotta say, the general understanding, I would think going into this would be, we operate marinas, and we want to continue to operate the marina for the South City, and the South City doesn't want to operate a marina. And everything else that we're doing in this agreement is preparing for some hopefully unnecessary eventuality. Ideally, a very low risk probability that we will be able to put this forward. And then also that any termination, we address the financial terms and obligations of how to make that fair and equitable to all parties, as we exit.
Yeah, and that has been there's been a lot of discussion about what that means. And it's one of the things I appreciate, please help me make sure I get it right. If, for example, Harbor District invests in upgrading of the marina, and then at the 15-year termination, the city decides to terminate, does the city owe the Harbor District any money for the capital improvements that were made during the 15-year term? I've been saying no. Then they've been saying
Had a
yes.
different perspective.
So that's something we'll have to work through and see if we can't find a common ground on that. Currently, the JPA is silent on that issue, but I know that has come up in study sessions the Harbor District has held, and your consultants have raised that issue.
And I think there are models out there that might address this issue, a depreciated value, something like that. But I think that, again, this might be one of those sort of high-risk, low-probability quarters of the area where we don't want to, we need to address it. We would like to think that if both parties are doing their part, there'll be no need to actually figure out what that looks like in real life.
Yeah, like most agreements, we're gonna spend all our time on the worst case scenario
Exactly right.
and planning for that. But maybe there is some objective criteria we can bring to this committee so you can discuss and decide on what to do about, in the event of termination, is there an accounting for those capital improvements? And if so, you know, how do you compute that and how does the city pay that? You know, yet to be determined, on our side anyway.
I was kind of, when you talk about worst case scenario, I wanted to go back to number 4. And for instance, talk about not, it's my understanding that Greenland and the development of that whole peninsula or the whole block of land, they're gonna raise things up to a safe level for sea level rise. Is that correct, or?
Only for a portion. So Mary, you might point out the boundaries that the developer will work on. And that
Yes.
which it won't.
Yes, so they will take it right to the west edge of the spit.
Okay,
And that's just the boundaries of the DDA.
So the spit and anything east of that, say the Weta property or out around where the bait shop is and all that, is not included in the Oyster Point development.
The new street does go further, but the sea level rise stops at the west side of the spit.
And you referenced the CDA?
DDA, the DDA.
Oh, the
where
development agreement.
Oyster Point is.
yeah, just, as long as we're,
Didn't sign that agreement, did it?
Not yet.
The ocean.
just when we talk about, work's gonna be done on a seawall, as we measure our options on the spit, should we have a quote for them to continue the work? And figure out, if you're gonna retain the spit. I'd hate to see, one construction company stop right here and another construction company pick it up when there's full momentum going on. So it'd be nice to incorporate a quote at least, says, okay, you're stopping here, what if you stop to the east side of the spit?
I mean, the study that we're supposed to get in a few weeks will give us a, current cost estimate. It's by the same designers that are doing the actual Oyster Point work. So they'll give us the cost estimate. We did not include it in the contract just because we don't have the money. But if policymakers see that fit, there's a possibility of a change order, but those decisions can be made. It's not too late, but the big challenge was we did not yet have a design solution and we didn't know the cost implication.
Yeah, cause I also worried about, we saw the '89 earthquake and what it did around here. And as long as, these two groups are working adequately with Greenland and saying, now, are you sure this is strong enough for our worst case scenario? So I would just put that out there as a safety net for everyone here.
Good, thank you. On governance, we left it the same with the addition of, we'd like this body, the Liaison Committee, to also review the CIP budget from the Harbor District annually. So there's no authority granted there, but it is an obligation to review it, and that would go in line with the earlier Term 3 capital improvements, so that this body is kept abreast of the capital improvements being made out there. But otherwise, keep it the same, governance-wise. And then finally, a recognition that future land planning still must take place on the portion which is controlled under this scenario by the Harbor District, the end point. There will be a point where we or someone is able to tear up the parking lot, for example. That was paid for by the yes. But when we have an obligation to keep that parking lot in place for a certain length of time.
That's right, and I believe it's 2026 also, or thereabouts. The DBW funded the boat launch, and the large parking lot for trailer boats. And when DPW does something like that, they restrict the uses for a certain period of time. Do you remember when that term ends?
I believe it was in 10 years from now, but I'm
Yeah,
not certain.
okay. Yeah.
But there will be a point when that restriction is soon to come off, it's in the window, and we should get together and envision perhaps a higher and better use out there.
Is that the last bullet point, Mike? The boat ramp?
Yes.
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 Oh, 2020, yeah, 25.
Yeah, until that restriction is listed, there's not a lot of space to do much. But on our side, the Greenland development is moving forward and under construction right now. Last week, the city council did settle upon a hotel developer to build a hotel. And we have the vision and believe we will achieve having a very highly amenitized waterfront on our portion. And there's an opportunity, once the restriction is lifted on the Harbor District portion, to continue that sort of ferry village, high-quality, amenitized vision. And so put in place some language that when that day comes, we will partner together so that the entire area becomes something really special and unique. And that would presumably also increase the revenues and give the Harbor District, you mentioned finances a little earlier, perhaps ways of generating higher revenue through restaurants or whatever else might be located out there.
I think there are some sort of fundamental policy or vision questions in there when we get to that point too, though, around what it is that we do want to see there, and does a boat ramp fit into that? Is a boat ramp important to the operation of that marina? Is the boat ramp important to the residents of South City and neighboring areas? And how does that play in with any sort of overarching vision? The thing about a boat ramp is it may look like a very small little section of the land-water interface, but the land-side repercussions of that use can be fairly extensive, because you're going to start parking all those trucks and trailers. So I think there's a big policy decision there.
And just to mention, Sausalito went through a terrible time when they abolished their launch ramp for small vessels. And that was years ago, and that's still brought up about boaters now. Where do they launch? Black Point, I mean, they talk about a lot of different places, and then they get into places that haven't been dredged, but there's gonna be a significant impact if you take that launch ramp away. And we want our public to be aware and not lose that. But then again, there's a limited amount of land if we can put in a beautiful ferry village.
Well, we know that's something that in the future, either this body or subsequent elected officials will have to wrestle with. So we want to forecast that and put a mechanism in place for that debate to happen in an organized way in the future. You know, those are the terms that we have come up with. Certainly, if there are additional items you would like us to consider as we move on to the next step of actually trying to turn this into some legal document, are there any other concerns that this body would like us to research or include?
Yeah, I have two questions. When is the lease expired for the yacht club?
You know, it's a long ways down the road.
It's single green light too, so it's a problem.
The yacht club actually built that facility from the ground up. It was a ground lease from the district to the yacht club. So they paid for the site improvements and the building itself. In exchange for that, they got a 25 with a 25 option, and I think they're probably close to exercising that second option, but I don't have that information right at hand in 25 years, so.
And what you meant by a single green light is it's their determination.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think we should put our land use attorneys on top of that from both departments.
The option, I mean, an option that could be considered if it was determined there was higher and better use for that land would be to redevelop as long as they were provided with like facilities.
And Tom, I have a question for you, since you're a boater. Is there any other boat launches on the peninsula? I know Brisbane doesn't have one.
I'd have to look that up,
Okay.
but I was trying to think about that even before we asked.
Yeah, I think
Do
Coyote
they?
Point.
Coyote Point has a boat launch.
I think so.
I'll look at it. Thank you.
Then, from a boater's point of view, think about, now you've got the additional 20, 30 minutes to get to the
Mhm.
Bay Bridge, and then most of your activities are further than that.
And what's the parking lot at Oyster Point versus, yeah, sorry.
The other thing is, are we gonna need, to talk to agencies greater than just the two that are in this room? Talk about possibly improving the channel coming in, cause there's a lot of mud flat out there in the bay. What kind of buoyage needs to be, in the way of lateral markers to provide marking for a safe harbor? And I think that's above and beyond the discussion of this group.
Outside of the marina?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I know
There's
that,
a lot of mud flat out there.
yeah,
Sure.
I don't know how that is marked currently, what the charts say. I know the Weta can certainly
Yeah, there's no markers.
move in and out, and WIDA they're embarking on a dredge project within the marina.
Okay.
And started the planning and permitting process for that. I don't know what their responsibility is outside the marina.
Any comments or suggestions for our general manager and city manager?
From what you've heard, can we get feedback from the Liaison Committee on whether staff should continue these efforts and take these basic terms and maps and invest the time and resources to developing a more formal document?
Mr. Bernardo?
Yes, I like the direction that this draft agreement just is at, in talking through it, I like this direction. I feel comfortable with it.
I recently indicated to the city manager that I was ready to abandon the process. And I was compelled by the mayor's steadfastness to continue the discussion. And so I think we are definitely going down a path that is palatable to me, who's least likely to support another JPA, if we can understand the business terms and how exiting at year 15 would affect both sides, or 25 years out. But as long as those questions are answered sufficiently, I guess I certainly could support the concept that the harbor district is best to run the marina, and the city doesn't care to. Yeah, I can sign on to that.
I concur. Like to see this pursued further between the two managers.
Great, thank you to this body. There being no other further discussions, I think you two have enough from us.
We know what to do.
Great.
Okay,
All
thank you. Gabriel, number 2, please.
Item 2, discussion on meeting procedures. Mike Fertrell, City Manager, and Steve McGraw, District General Manager.
So in the past, we have had a court reporter here to transcribe. We were to have a court reporter here today. That individual called in sick. We were unable to procure, so now we have our deputy clerk taking the minutes. So the question that staff would recommend that we move away from the cost of the court reporter and transcribing this particular meeting. This is the only meeting that we as a city hold where that is done. And instead move to action minutes, which is what every other committee we do does. And we would have a staff member create those minutes, and then they'd be back for your approval. But because it had been the practice in the past to have a court reporter, I was uncomfortable with making that unilateral decision to stop having it before polling the members of the liaison committee to say, do you care, do you mind if we no longer have a court reporter. Instead, we do action minutes as we do in every other body instead.
Mike, and if I could just add, in
Yes.
the video, and it would be videoed, which is why it would be, if you had action minutes,
That
you
is
actually
true.
have access to the video that would replay the whole meeting.
So are we videoing the meeting?
It's a shared cost,
Oh, it is?
yes, and then
Okay.
every meeting would be videoed, and then it would be supplemented with action minutes, which would be much
Okay,
simpler.
yeah.
I'm okay with
that's
that.
Okay.
So thank you. We do think that would be a smoother way to run. We wanted your advice first. Thank you.
Any other items from this body before we adjourn the meeting? From staff? None? Thank you. So this meeting is adjourned at 12:52.
Okay, thank you very much.